Roosevelt in 33. That's the executive order right there. And he confiscated gold and devalued the dollar by 40%, effectively revaluing gold. Its gold is held in every central bank balance sheet in an account that is titled the Gold Revaluation Account. The head of the Dutch National Bank has been talking about this for 2 years, that we should revalue gold and offset our liabilities with our gold. Gold is still valued at the Bretton Woods price of $35 an ounce around the globe, and in the United States, it was valued in the 70s. It was $42.22 an ounce. Don't know why they picked that number, but that is the official price of gold on the U.S. balance sheet. I do think they'll revalue it. In fact, I'm quite confident of it. Even Cynthia Lummis, the senator from Wyoming, talked about that at the Bitcoin conference in Tennessee a few weeks ago when Trump spoke about building a strategic Bitcoin account to partially pay off the debt and whatnot. She said, I'm fashioning a bill to, in essence, propose that we revalue the gold that the Federal Reserve is holding on behalf of the Treasury, and to partially use it to fund the Bitcoin purchases. I think it's too hard to ignore, actually. You see all the central banks buying it at a level the world has never seen, and they're all repatriating their gold from the traditional centers of safety, the New York Fed, which gives access to COMEX, and the Bank of England, which gives access to the LBMA. 40 banks have brought their gold home from these two epicenters, and the level of purchasing is off the charts.
Did you know that central banks are repatriating their gold at unprecedented levels? In fact, 40 countries have moved their reserves from places like the New York Fed and Bank of England, signaling a major shift in global strategy. Andy Schectman warns that the US might revalue gold to $130,000 an ounce, wiping out trillions in debt and fundamentally reshaping the financial landscape. With countries like Saudi Arabia secretly stockpiling gold and bypassing IMF reporting, the stage is being set for a potential gold-backed monetary reset. Central banks are buying gold at rates never seen before. Could this be the beginning of a new era where gold reclaims its role as the pillar of global finance?
So, yes, I think revaluation is something we will see happen. And it's look, make it 130,000 an ounce, you could offset your balance sheet like that. And every $4,000 increase in
right? You
What's
could
that?
you could burn all the debt off with that.
Right. You offset your balance sheet. Your assets are on par with your liabilities. Every $4,000 increase is $1 trillion free and clear to the Treasury General account. And Janet wouldn't even need to get congressional approval. She'd say, hey, Jerome, make gold 130,000. And that's what it is. And we will just pay 130,000 to anyone who wants to sell us their gold. Well, that would be highly inflationary. But it would probably be a lesser solution or a lesser evil than defaulting outright on our obligations. But I do think it's something that they notice, and it's something that is hard not to notice. And when you think about all these countries not being forthright in the amount of gold they're accumulating, look at Saudi Arabia. They bought 160 tons and didn't tell the IMF and got caught on the import-export numbers. Oh, sorry, made a mistake. They're supposed to tell the IMF when the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, when they buy gold, they don't have to tell the IMF. When the proxy banks for any of these countries working on behalf in a stealth manner on behalf of the central banks by proxy, they don't have to report to the IMF. When these commercial banks are buying from the refineries in South Africa or Switzerland, they don't tell the IMF. If metal that is accumulated is not 995 pure, don't have to tell the IMF. What's China doing right now? Flying all around buying doré and sludge, unrefined product that they are then refining in China. They're the second largest producer of silver in the world and the first of gold. Do you think they tell us how much they make? It doesn't behoove them to do so if revaluation is coming. And I do think they will revalue it. Why else would the most powerful bank in the world, the BIS, reclassify gold as the world's only other tier one reserve asset? Why? They wouldn't. They don't do things for just shits and giggles. They did it because they know that gold will be a central pivot, a pillar to a new system to inspire confidence again. So all the banks are buying it and repatriating it. The BIS told them to do so, just like they did in 2017 when all of the banks, starting with the German Bundesbank, the Bank of Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Czech Bank, they all brought their gold home from the New York Fed. Then those banks bought more gold in 2018 together as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined, doubled that amount in 2019. And then somehow coincidentally, the BIS said, oh, by the way, gold's now tier one, the only other tier one asset. Someone asked me in there, do you think silver will be tier one? No, I don't. But it's strategic. It's needed. It's the same thing. It ain't going anywhere. It will follow gold as it always has. There's a 90% correlation in movement throughout all of history. But gold is money now, and the central banks realize that, and will go to a level through revaluation that nobody thinks possible. And when it gets to that point, it will never come back down because it will be pegged to a new system. Government doesn't need to confiscate gold. They'll just make it so damn expensive no one can afford it. And the few people that have it will represent the pimple on the elephant's ass, and they're not going to care. But the price of gold will be pegged to a new system, would be my guess, 100%. Now, in terms of front running, Mark Moss talked about this, and I love Mark. He's a very smart man, and I agree with him. And I've talked about this because, I was interviewed by Michelle McCory a year and a half ago in Vancouver, and on Kitco. I'm proud to say it is the most widely viewed video Kitco has ever posted on YouTube. And she asked me straight up, looking at me, how can the West stop this? And I said, well, the IMF just published a report. This was in 2023 that said gold as an international reserve currency, a barbarous relic no more, ? That's interesting. And the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said, any CBDC that's not pegged to something is fiat. What would you peg it to? How about the only other tier one asset in the world? Gold. Who's buying all the gold? The central banks. Who's repatriating all the gold? The central banks. And, I think indeed that is a playbook where if you want to inspire confidence, you have to peg it to gold. And this is where a marriage between blockchain technology and gold come together, showing immutability and veracity, and the inability of the government to print away the value of the currency the way they always do. Blockchain and gold would stop that. And I think that is indeed what would happen, but you would have to raise gold to a level that's high enough. Now, if you look at the unit settlement currency, something very interesting is there. The Swiss used to have 40% gold backing. That's how they were able to use monetary policy with the other 60%, but still have a tether to sanity with the 40. Well, what is the unit? 40% gold backing is what they've agreed to in principle. The meeting in a few weeks, we may find out greater clarity, but even if they don't announce it, it's already the cat's out of the bag, and they will do something like that. They'll put it at a level that's very high, and they'll peg roughly 40% of it, which gives it stability and confidence, but yet gives the politicians the ability to have wiggle room with monetary policy. So it is something that I think will indeed happen, and I think it's coming. Don't know when. I think it would be definitely an advantage of the West to issue this before the BRICS do, to say, here's our Western system, call it Project Agora or whatever you want to do. They have this thing that rivals Mbridge. However you want to issue it, a CBDC pegged to gold. Yeah, maybe. And you look at the wisdom of someone like Judy Shelton, where if Trump wins, she would be his nominee to run the Fed. She's an advocate for the gold standard. What she said was one of the smartest things I've heard in a long time. She said, who the hell wants to buy our treasuries? We're inflating away the dollar to the degree of $100,000 per second, 24/7, $1 trillion every 100 days. We've weaponized that market. Who wants to trust us and buy it? The only way you'll get people to drink that Kool-Aid ever again, after you've peed in the punch bowl so much, is to make those treasuries redeemable in gold, 30-year treasuries redeemable in gold. Genius. Yeah, I mean, gold, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And this is just coming back full circle and looking at gold as a tether to sanity. And I think indeed that is the role it will play. You have 180 years of nothing but zero inflation and the highest prosperity the world has ever seen, and growth. And that was when the gold dollar was backed by gold. And the minute the Federal Reserve came in and we unpegged gold in 33, the dollar has lost all its value and inflation has run rampant. And so those people are saying that are just talking heads and mouthpieces for the establishment. The bankers don't like it because it neuters them. It doesn't give them the ability to create money at the behest of their desires. And but yet you go back and look, and yes, it was a different time, and so what? We had no inflation and great prosperity, and now we're supposed to believe that 2% inflation is normal. Why not negative 2%? The lower the standard of, I mean, the lower the inflation rate, the higher the standard of living.
Yes.
And you know, and I think that's important. And so 7% money creation would then denote a in 10.2 years, the value of your currency is cut in half, 7 into 72. 10 years ago, the currency was worth half of what it is today, or was worth double what it is today. 10 years ago, gold was 1,200 bucks, and today it's 2,650. So gold has gone up just a little bit more than twice or double, or is it that the dollar fell by half? Which one is it? I would argue it's the dollar falling, not gold rising. And this is the point: is that inflation is a killer, a stealth tax, and it's insidious. But why not have no inflation? Well, the only time we ever had no inflation was the 180 years when gold was tied to money. And so those people who say that, I think, are not looking at things correctly, and maybe they're just ignorant. I'm not sure.
Now that you understand how central banks are stockpiling gold and the potential for a massive revaluation, you're going to want to know what comes next. Make sure you watch the next important video on this channel to dive deeper into how these moves could reshape the global financial system and what it means for your wealth.